So, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to try to squeeze about 40 years of research and practice into 15 minutes, so hold on to your seats. We'll go quickly. So the premise here is simply an evolution of mindfulness. We know that due to timing, karma, many causes and conditions coming together, mindfulness has been very successful in coming to prominence globally. However, this has been a horizontal development. The same core practices have been applied in every conceivable aspect of life, but with no vertical evolution. But if you could integrate the richness of Vajrayana into these contexts, it would be great benefit, wouldn't it? Particularly because this will open the door to the whole realm of modern psychology and add all kinds of precision and depth to what we're trying to do. And so very briefly, mindfulness background here. We know that mindfulness burst on the scene about 1990, but there were many antecedents years before, including Vipassana, Zen Buddhism, and the yoga and chakra revolution were already in full swing. Neuroscience jumped in, but it culminated with Kabat-Zinn in 1990, and this brought it to the attention of both professionals and lay people. And it really, interestingly, only caught the attention of the whole world in about 2014, only 10 years ago, when it became the darling of the global media, mainstream media. And so we have this core suite of practices designed to develop presence and objectivity, self-awareness, control of an emotional activity, and so on. And in this diagram, we see that there's all kinds of applications where these same practices have been applied, everything from leadership to parenting to anxiety and depression to end-of-life care and so on and so forth. But meanwhile, there was another revolution going on since the 60s and 70s with great meditation masters of Vajrayana like the 16th Karmapa, with whom I took refuge, Kalo Rinpoche, under whom I did my retreat, Dilgo Khyentse, Trungpa, and so on. And they came to the West, opened centers, started 3-year retreats, and really captured the minds and hearts of a new generation. However, Vajrayana is highly complex, as we know. It's convoluted and even arcane. And unlike simple presence, it's not for everyone. But there is one core aspect we can integrate and it truly opens the door to deep personal change. And if you walk 1,000 feet in any direction, you'll see 10,000 prayer flags fluttering in the wind, and we understand what this is about. The famous 5 elements. Yeah, so what are these 5 elements? Very interesting. It's never been properly defined. I call them formative forces. They're energy information matrices. They're patterns of archetypal meaning. They're fundamental building blocks of reality. And they express themselves in many different ways. In the outer world, they're the basis of all structure, form, and function. On a physical level, they're the basis of biological level. On the mind level, they're the substrate of all perceptions, functions, and experience. And there is a hierarchy, of course. It's expressed on multiple levels, including the highest spiritual level. They're each distinct, one from the other, have their own characteristics and qualities, and they also have their own potential, opportunities, and challenges. And they also are in the form of sub-elements, so they nest within each other, creating the multiplicity of things. And finally, we can access them through very specific colors, forms, sounds, mantras, and so on. And so here we have a very brief little overview of the spheres of actions of the elements. So earth is about structure, stability, hierarchy, protection, security, wholeness. Water is cohesion, flexibility, flow, nourishment, and it's the universal solvent. It's all-encompassing. Fire is energy, vitality, directedness, purpose, radiation. Air is mobility, communication, resourcefulness, and adaptation. Space is coordination, integration, harmony, regulation. And placed in their traditional form here of a mandala, we see they're arranged properly. Now, I've taken the liberty of changing the central space circle to a pentagon to reflect its real nature as the center of the mandala. And also we see that, as we said, they do manifest as sub-elements. So we have here 3 layers of elements within elements, and we'll see why this is important in a few minutes. They also are pervasive. So here we have our theoretical stacked up mandalas all the way from the spiritual level down to the atomic level. And they express themselves, of course, differently in these different forms. And very briefly, the background of the elements. This is a pan-global phenomenon. It's not just Tibetan, not just Indian. So we have the Hindu, the Buddhist, the Christian. We have this as the basis of Ayurveda. We have the Greek and Roman traditions of the elements and the temperaments. And this held sway for over 2,000 years. This is the basis of both philosophy and religion in the West. And somehow, of course, we know that the 5 elements shrunk down to the 4 elements. And the loss of the 5th element is a whole other topic we won't get into right now. And here are just some of the ancient texts which, where the 5 elements are first mentioned. We have in the Vedas, the Pali Canon. Very interesting that this is a misspelling. This is the Kolo Tara Tantra, is the very first place where there were diagrams and illustrations of both the elements and the forms of the chakras, which we use today. And here, if we had time, we'd go through this fantastic diagram of this tangled history of the elements and how this information has flowed down, not only from India, but from Chaldea or Babylon, Persia, Egypt, down through the east and down through the west, and come down to us in its current form. And for me, the project has been over the decades of gathering together the scattered pieces over time and culture to, again, create a cohesive whole of what these elements are really about. And here are just some of the sources that have been very near and dear to me because they do talk about the healing power of the elements and give us a lot of resources, the Shangpa lineage, Tongten Gyalpo, of course, and Machix Che. And as was mentioned, some modern masters who introduced this to the West, such as Tinley Norbu, Tenzin Wangyal, the Bunpo, and the Westerner Ngakpa Chogyam. In terms of modern integration, the 5 elements truly open the door to the landscape of the mind. So here we have, again, a brief overview of these elements now applied to psychology. Earth now becomes the ruler. That's about enrichment, stability, dominion, organization, being grounded. Water becomes the lover, connection, compassion, nurturance, sensitivity. Fire becomes warrior, focus, willpower, purpose, responsibility, justice. Air becomes creator, creativity, resourcefulness, communication, discovery, freedom. Space becomes guru, inner wisdom, balance, mentorship, impartiality, non-judgmental approach. And so here's some of the resources we can draw on, as we said, Vajrayana, Hindu Tantra, Western mysticism, and the whole arena of temperament. And so this shows that we can draw on all of these different realms of psychology. There's elements of our elemental knowledge here within humanistic psychology, existential, etc., Buddhist, of course, family therapy, Jungian, naturally. And this is just some of the characters who are involved with the 4 temperament system. And we don't have to go through these, but I actually have about 5 pages of these kind of charts going from the 1880s on down, showing the author and the different way they expressed earth, water, fire, air. Most of them, these are 4-part systems, again, because the loss of the 5th element in the West, which was tragic. And here, placing our psychological elements within the mandala, we have them arranged properly: ruler, lover, creator, guru, warrior. And here we have a dual mandala. We have both the elemental, you could say the cosmic, elemental, biological elements, and then we have the psychological elements. And here, of course, we're using the Platonic solids, which I do use in meditations. And if we expanded that out, as we said, in terms of sub-elements, now, for example, for air, you might have the air of air, the fire of air, the earth of air, the water of air. And when you do that, you get a very nice 25 different qualities and characteristics that you could describe as our nature, the positive qualities that make up our true nature. But of course, we don't necessarily live in our true nature all the time, do we? Within our basic sanity, our basic goodness. When we become disconnected from this, in any of the 5 ways, we get what I call loss. And this state of deficiency is too painful, we may go into a state of compensation, a false kind of power, the dark side, the pretense of power, which is shadow. So therefore, we have 3 different mandalas here of power, loss, and shadow. For example, the warrior who, because of trauma and because of conditioning and so on, feels like a weakling, if that's too painful, they may become the I call it the killer here, but let's say they become the bully. The guru who feels they don't know anything, I just can't know and don't know, they may stay in that state or they may decide to fake it, become the charlatan. The ruler could become the dictator. The lover, going into their forlorn state of loss, being the orphan, being rejected, they may become the manipulator. So if we expand on those, different. We have these 25 forms of loss, 25 characteristics of loss corresponding to the power. And equally, we can have 25 different forms of shadow. If we put this all together, we have 75 different possible modes. And believe me, this covers just about the entirety of what humans can experience outside of severe pathology or spirituality. And actually, if you want to test this out, you can watch movies and you'll see all those. This is the best way to train yourself in understanding psychology in general, and certainly the 5 elemental psychology, because in the movies, things are portrayed so clearly and so vividly, and you can actually name and coordinate each one of these qualities and characteristics to the characters as they're portraying them. So because we have 5 elements with 3 different flavors, we have 15 human drives in total. We have 75 modes of human existence. And believe it or not, if you connect all the dots of these relationships, you have only 225 possible human relationships. And that sums it up. Each has their own name and has their own capacity. And one day maybe we'll have enough of a language that we'll be able to have a psychology where we can name what is happening, what is that interaction that I'm undergoing right now. And so what are we going to do with all this material? It's great knowledge, but how do we apply it? Well, fortunately, the great masters of meditation have left us the gift of different ways to access these elements. So we have shape, color, sound, mantra, mudra, emotions, affirmations, and meanings that we can use. And for to make this accessible, for decades I've prescribed these kinds of meditations to my patients as well as students. Whoops, went too far. In the form of these little cards or PDFs that I give to them so that they can use these. We have actually 8 different types of meditations for each element, which makes for 40 different possible meditations, integrating color, sound, and so on, such as this, which is a light infusion, elemental detox, sound infusion, and so on. And I made this into a little deck of cards so that people can use them and diagnose themselves or be diagnosed and work with these elements, learn to directly access and experience the elements. Perfect. So how do we apply this? Now we're first full circle, we come back to our application. Right? Remember, there were these 16 different ways that mindfulness is used. But if we integrated the 5 elements, for example, we see that in each of those domains, you could use all of the 5 elements, but then there's some specific, of course, predilections. For example, conflict resolution, we have fire and water, which could be male and female as well. Male and female within you, not gender. So each of us has to balance the fire and the water. In parenting and family, we might rely on the structure of earth element, as well as the nourishment of water element, and so on. And so the benefits here are obvious. We can understand and address the underlying psychology of ourselves and others, self-knowledge. We have so many different solutions and ways to correct all these different aberrations that happen to us. We can connect to archetypal meanings. It also addresses bioenergetic issues because the basis of psychology is the energetics within the body, not just thoughts and cognition and emotion. And we connect to fundamental spiritual forces. So we have these truly unique and powerful methods, not really accessible any other way. So, in conclusion, may you all come to access, understand, purify, and fully empower yourself with ruler, lover, warrior, creator, and guru. Ring the bell. I'm done. Thank you.